bring on our guest tonight, Shane. He is the managing editor of Bears Talk and the host of the Bears Talk podcast. He is Bryan Perez. Bryan, man, thanks for coming on with us tonight.
What's going on, fellas? It's my pleasure.
All right, so what are the Bears going to do with the first pick? Let's get this over with.
I think the safe bet, if you're a betting man, you wager a lot of money on the fact that the Bears won't have the first pick come April. I think they're going to trade out. I think they're going to do what most Bears fans are hoping they do, at least hoping that Ryan Poles does, and just leverage that pick, take full advantage of them basically backing into it unexpectedly. You know, no one thought they were going to be great this year, but I don't think anyone thought they would be the first overall pick. And up until those final minutes of the Texans game, they weren't. So the fact that they got that pick, it's kind of like just the dream come true. It's the closest thing the Bears fans have had to winning the Super Bowl. It's just the polar opposite, but it's a great feeling to have that pick, to have that leverage. And I think Ryan Poles is going to end up trading out.
So, look, I think that's the dream, right? You get a big package, you get someone to move up. Do you have any concerns, I guess, with how far the Bears are willing to move down, or what is there kind of a floor here? You know, because, the Bears don't need a quarterback. You have Justin Fields. We'll talk about that later. But you do have some elite defensive prospects in this draft, like Will Anderson from Alabama, Jalen Carter from Georgia. You know, is there a point where they say, hey, we're not going to move down below this pick, you think?
Yeah, I think the floor is number 4 right now with the Colts. I think if you're trying to play the draft board game, the chess that kind of goes behind the first round, the mock drafts, what they're probably doing inside Hallis Hall right now, or will do once free agency kind of comes to an end. The number 4 pick feels like the floor, because if quarterbacks go 1-2, then you're guaranteed either Jalen Carter or Will Anderson Jr. at number 4. But the Texans, to me, still feel like a little bit of a wild card. I know a lot of people are assuming that whoever trades into number 1 is going to take Bryce Young. But if it's not the Texans, will they take the next quarterback at 2, or are they going to take best player available, which to me would probably be Will Anderson at that point? And they still have a pick later in the first round. One of these quarterbacks, you guys know as well as anybody, a lot of hype around the quarterback class in December, January, and February tends to die off as we get closer to March and ultimately April. So a lot of guys that draft analysts and fans are projecting as being a top 5 quarterback right now, you know, back in the day, we saw Geno Smith this year have a resurrection to his career, but it wasn't too long ago when he was coming out of West Virginia that he was, during the season, supposed to be the first overall pick, and he ends up being a second rounder. And you see that year after year with some of these quarterbacks who everybody says, oh, it's a first round lock. Malik Willis is the perfect example last year this time. A lot of mock drafts had him as a top 10 pick after the Senior Bowl, and he ended up being, a third rounder. So I think we have to be careful. The Bears have to be careful not to trade down too far. The perfect scenario is if the Texans want to move up 1 spot, take Bryce Young, the Bears are at 2, because at that point, if the Colts want to trade up to 2, they're not trading up for the defensive player. You know they're going to take the quarterback. Otherwise, they would just stay at 4 and take whatever defensive player falls to them. So I think there is still some risk going anywhere outside of number 1 at this point, because you might not have that run on quarterbacks like a lot of people are projecting right now. But if we're going to just say, look, we'll play the quarterback game right now and assume the top 2 picks are going to be passers, number 4 feels like the floor. But again, they could trade down twice and still end up with Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, depending on how desperate these quarterback needy teams become in that top 10 range.
The old double dip. You'd love to see it if you're a Bears fan.
That's the dream. That's the dream scenario for the Bears. Just got to see how this shakes out. I mean, like I said, the quarterback market is always a volatile one. And right now, sure, everybody's hyping up Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and Will Levis. We got to see. There's a lot of time left in draft season before we could say confidently that more than one of them will be top 5 picks.
So let's hypothetically say that they don't get the haul they want. Like nobody's calling. The phone is dead. Who are we taking at 1? What defensive player do you think is a bigger impact, fits better for the Bears next year, Anderson or Carter?
Well, I mean, the fit is probably Jalen Carter. But I think the long-term impact would be Will Anderson. And my personal philosophy around the number 1 pick has really never changed. It's always been about the quarterback. If you don't have one, you draft one. If you have one, you try to either protect him Or on defense, you get the guy that could sack the opponent's quarterback. It's always got to be about the quarterback. And right now in this year's draft, there's no offensive tackle that's really worthy of the number one pick. And Will Anderson's probably the best player pound for pound in the class, more so in my opinion than even Jalen Carter. So I wouldn't even hesitate. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. Will Anderson is the number one pick. But the Bears and the defensive system that Matt Eberflus runs, it's so dependent on that 3 technique. And if you have a guy like Jalen Carter, it's like perfect value meeting absolute need at the number one pick. So Ryan Poles is in a great spot this year. He literally can't mess it up. The only way he screws up is if he doesn't get a bounty of picks for that number one. If he's not able to trade down, I think Bears fans and analysts and writers will have some ammunition to criticize him. But if he does trade down and takes either Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, it's going to be an A+. I mean, there's going to be no way to give him a grade lower than that unless you're just applying personal bias and personal preference. Both players are ideal for what they need in 2023 and beyond. He can't mess it up. If I was making the pick, it would be Will Anderson.
Last week on the show, we did a 1-round mock draft. I picked for the Bears. I picked Will Anderson at 1. We had some conversation, and Brian and I both think this is absurd. I think most people do, but I have to ask the question, is there any chance, any small percentage of chance that the Bears consider a quarterback at 1 and either keep both or trade Justin Fields?
I mean, if Ryan Poles did that, in my opinion, it would be a fireable offense. I think that would be football malpractice. It would be overthinking the process. We saw Justin Fields in 2022 do things that literally no quarterback has ever done. Granted, he did it with his legs. But he showed enough, in my opinion, enough flashes as a passer. I mean, he threw some ridiculous passes in the 2022 season. He just didn't do it consistently, and he didn't have an alpha wide receiver to make his throws easier, and his offensive line didn't do him any favors. I mean, he was literally playing with one arm tied behind his back. At some points, both arms tied behind his back, so he had to rely on his legs. And what he proved in 2022 is that there are very few people walking on planet Earth who can do what he does on a football field. You don't trade a guy like that. If you're an NFL coaching staff, if you're an NFL front office, the number one goal is to coach him up if there are some issues that need to be cleaned up with him as a passer, and give him a supporting cast. The priority should never be get rid of a guy like that. The priority should be, what can we do to help him? He is a quarterback that could take the Chicago Bears to a Super Bowl. He literally is a quarterback who by himself, kept this team in games against the Eagles and other competitive one-score games. The Bears rarely, I mean, at some games they did get blown out, but rarely was it a complete, utter disaster for 4 quarters. And it was usually because Justin Fields kept them in games. To me, it's mind-numbing that there are some analysts who suggest that Bryce Young trading out and picking Bryce, or trading Fields and picking Bryce Young, would somehow be the better option for the Chicago Bears. Bryce Young would get killed behind the Chicago Bears offensive line. Justin Fields is 6'3", almost 230 pounds, runs in the 4.4s. He's got the body armor that's needed to be able to withstand the growing pains of the Chicago Bears offensive line. Bryce Young would break in half in his first season behind the Bears offensive line. Justin Fields was running on fumes by the end of the year. Shoulder injury, hip injury. He got beat up, but that guy always got up. And the difference between that and Bryce Young, look, Bryce Young is a great quarterback prospect, and there's no doubt. But I'm old school. I'm old school when I say 5'11", 5'10 and a half, 190. There are reasons why we have never really seen guys like that be elite for over long periods of time in the league. Justin Fields is the perfect combination of old school, prototypical physical build and new school, rare athleticism. If the Bears can't make it work with him, everybody in the building should be fired. Everybody. And if they even consider trading him, everybody in the building should be fired. He is that special of a player. And as a Bears fan who has gone through decades of quarterback hell, it's just so offensive. It should be so offensive to the most diehard of Bears fans when they see guys like Mike Tannenbaum and some of these other analysts suggest that Chicago should trade Justin Fields. It's just, like I said before, it's mind-numbing.
I don't think you're going to get any disagreement from us.
No.
None at all. You mentioned supporting cast, and so I have to bring up the fact that now the Bears have essentially traded a first-round pick for Chase Claypool. I know Shane and Steeler fans are very happy about this. Are Bears fans happy about this, and are they going to recoup this value, or is it recoupable?
So here's the thing. I mean, I get the concern with, in hindsight, what the Bears gave up for Chase Claypool. At the time that they traded for Chase Claypool, there was this, it's kind of like a fork in the road moment in the Bears season where Justin Fields was starting to blossom. And it looked like the Bears, they were playing tough, one-score games. They had a chance to possibly win some of these games if they had the alpha playmaker on the outside. So the theory behind, the logic behind trading the second-round pick for Claypool at the time made sense. And you would find it would be very difficult to find a Bears fan at that time who didn't like the trade. Maybe they weren't thrilled with it, but it was an understandable, logical decision. Obviously, it didn't go as planned. Chase Claypool was not able to assimilate to the offense in the matter of weeks. Ryan Poles said at his end-of-year press conference, and he made a great point, like football trades mid-season are not like basketball or baseball or some of these other sports where it's those sports can almost, your individual talent can overcome system changes. In football, you really have to mesh with the quarterback. You need to know the playbook. You need to know the system. And that's a challenge, especially for a wide receiver coming in mid-season. He had a knee injury after that, missed a couple of games with a knee injury. The way I look at the Chase Claypool trade is if the Chicago Bears at pick number 32 were going to draft a wide receiver in the 2023 NFL draft, and there was a 6'4", 230-pound guy who runs in the 4.4s on the board, and we already kind of know what Chase Claypool can do and everything's going right, he would be the pick. I mean, the Bears would pick a guy like Chase Claypool at the 32nd pick. So Bears fans have to kind of erase from their memory the Chase Claypool they saw for 7-8 games, whatever it was. You just got to erase it from your memory. It's now, Chase Claypool is now a Bear. He's got a full offseason, a full training camp. Justin Fields has already said he's going to be working with him. So I think the best is yet to come from Chase Claypool. He's not even in his prime yet, and he offers the kind of physical traits that the Bears don't have in their passing game. So I'm looking at Claypool like at pick number 32. He's still younger than Velus Jones when they drafted him in the 3rd round last year, right? So at pick number 32, they just drafted Chase Claypool. He has the benefit of a head start over the rookie that they might have drafted at 32. Does that mean the trade's going to end up working out? Chase Claypool's due for a big contract after next season. If he doesn't play up to expectations, it won't be the first time the Bears drafted a wide receiver in the 2nd round who didn't work out. Anthony Miller just a couple years ago, he washed out of the league. I think maybe he actually signed with the Steelers. I don't even know. I think something like happened today. But it won't be the first time a 2nd rounder doesn't work out. And if I'm going to roll the dice on a player, give me the traits, give me some established NFL production. Claypool's not a bad roll of the dice. To me, it could be a win-win for both teams. The Steelers are going to get essentially a 1st-round value for a guy they probably weren't going to keep long-term. The Bears get a receiver who, if he was in free agency this year, an underwhelming free agent core, a group of wide receivers in 2023, he might be the most sought-after free agent wide receiver if he was in the class. So we have to kind of forget the recency issues that we saw with Claypool on the field, and just, it's like what you guys do, what I've done, NFL draft work. A lot of this is kind of projecting forward. What will he be able to do for the Chicago Bears after being with them for a full offseason? If we're sitting here at the end of next September, and Claypool has 9 catches for 97 yards, he's turning into like a Kenny Golladay for the Bears, then obviously huge miss, huge swing and miss. But at the end of the day, you got to take the swing to hit a home run, and Claypool is the classic boomer bust. He's either going to be a huge hit for the Bears or he won't be on the team in 2024. I'd roll the dice with a 2nd-round pick on that.
That's logical to me. I'm not going to fight you on that. Makes sense.
I think it's a fair argument. You mentioned free agency, and I kind of want to talk about the offseason as a whole because the Bears are projected to have maybe the most cap room to be able to spend. You have a projected 9 draft picks, maybe get more that haul for the number 1 overall pick. What, and you mentioned some already, but what are positions you think they'll address in the offseason in general? And there any that you're like, hey, this is going to be a free agent position and this is going to be a draft position? What are your kind of thoughts on that, Bryan?
Yeah, I think in many ways we could see free agency clear up, whether it's Jalen Carter or Will Anderson in the first round. I don't like that being a team's approach, but if the Bears sign a guy like Deron Payne in free agency, I mean, what are you going to do with Jalen Carter? Yeah, of course, you can make a super strength and just load up the defensive line. But if you sign Payne, who's 26 years old, if you sign him to a massive contract, Will Anderson's obviously the guy, I would think, right? So Bryan Perez said at the end of the year, and it's a key statement that he made, which is going to make it really hard to cover the Bears and make some predictions like you're talking about. He said the Bears have flexibility. And that's such a powerful thing to go into an offseason with, is flexibility. Essentially, he said, without saying it, we could literally do whatever we want. We could spend any amount of money we want. They have twice as much money, essentially, than the next team in free agency. They can top 3 guys on their free agent board, unless they drop the ball in recruiting or players are chasing more of the ring than the dollars. Their top 2 or 3 free agents on their wish list, as long as they're not franchised, they'll be Chicago Bears. It's almost like you could put it in pen, because there's going to be no competition from a dollars and cents standpoint if that's the player's number 1 priority. So that flexibility allows Bryan Perez to essentially pivot. Like, what happened in free agency could dictate what they do in the first round, and it could even make them trade back multiple times if they land a couple of pass rushers, a strong 2 or 3 defensive linemen. Maybe they sign the top offensive tackle in free agency. Now suddenly your draft needs are much lower, and if you want to just essentially build a contender, Bryan Perez always talks about a team that can sustain success. How do you sustain success in the NFL? You hit on as many draft picks as possible. And the odds of hitting on draft picks go way up if you have a lot of them, right? So I could see him saying, look, we signed 5 premier free agents. 5, maybe 3 on defense, 2 on offense. Now it's about, let's get as many rookies, top 2 to 3 round rookies in the building as possible. Let the cream rise to the top, and they could trade back even out of the top 10, potentially, if they really hit in free agency. So it's a tough question to answer, Shane. I think if the Bears are based on team needs right now, I think you're going to see defensive line and offensive line be where he wants to strike in free agency, because when you're drafting a rookie at those positions, it's tough to project what the 21-year-old, 22-year-old offensive tackle who won against maybe 50% of the time or less playing against NFL competition. The dominant offensive line prospects, they don't always hit. Why? Because most of the players they're going against in the 4 years in college are not going to be top-level NFL defensive linemen. But if you can sign a player entering year 5, unrestricted free agent, and you have 3 years of really good NFL tape, you're going to prioritize that guy, in my opinion, if you have the money to spend. He's proven it, and he's still young. So the offensive and defensive linemen who are proven quality starters, I think would be where he targets his free agent money. And then you hit the skill positions. You surround Justin Fields with as many weapons as possible in the draft. Wide receiver is like the new quarterback. You want to get the wide receiver on the rookie contract. So if you can get the first round wide receiver or a second round wide receiver and avoid having to pay the DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Deebo Samuel contract in free agency, that's the new, they're going to be recycling these guys as often as possible. So you could see wide receiver become an underrated first-round target. Not a lot of people are talking about that with the Bears right now because of where they pick. There's no wide receiver going number 1. But if they slide down to 12, 13, 14, I mean, that could end up being the priority. So, Shane, that's a word salad to say basically nothing. I have no idea where they're going to go. I mean, this is the ultimate unpredictable offseason, which makes it incredibly fun for Bears fans.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what makes it fun. That's what makes this whole process that we do fun is we can talk. We come up here and talk an hour every week. We have no idea what's going to happen April
Exactly.
27th. None. And that's what makes it fun. Senior Bowl announced their coaching staffs today, and Bears offensive coordinator Luke Getsy going to be the head coach of the American team, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, is that generally the SEC squad or is that the other? I can't remember.
I think it's generally the SEC squad,
Yeah.
but
So you're going to get the SEC squad down here with your coach. How beneficial do you think that's going to be?
I think it's huge. I know there were some tweets going around today showing the past Senior Bowl coaching staffs and the players that they ended up drafting from the Senior Bowl, and it was a relatively unimpressive list. For example, the Bears in 2017, I believe one of the Bears beat writers shared this on Twitter. The Bears in 2017, when they coached the Senior Bowl, coached guys like Cooper Kupp, didn't draft him. Right. I mean, so like, I don't buy that, to draft, as you guys know, it's a product of like, yeah, they might have had Cooper Kupp graded really high. It's just that, where their pick was, they couldn't get him. So, I mean, I don't, the revisionist history, it's very easy to shape draft results to fit a narrative that you want to push. But as you talked about, Brian, the draft is a completely unpredictable process. Even for the most well-prepared war rooms, you could have Cooper Kupp graded very high, but you might have some other player graded slightly higher. You roll the dice that Cooper Kupp might slide to the next round, and then the Rams draft him. Like, you don't know how it's going to shake out. So just because the Bears didn't draft Cooper Kupp and they coached him at the Senior Bowl doesn't mean they didn't like him and gain really valuable information during the Senior Bowl. It's just the way the draft fell. Personally, I think coaching the Senior Bowl is a huge advantage because you get to learn the things that don't show up in a scouting report. You get to learn the things that don't show up at a pro day or at the NFL Combine. You get to see what the players' practice habits are like. You get to see what their personality is like when they interact with a coach who's trying to coach them up. You see what they're like in meetings, in prep. I mean, there is a game, right? Everybody, all the draft analysts, like the three of us, focus on the practices and we kind of ignore the game. I'm going to the Senior Bowl. I'm flying out even before the last practice on Thursday afternoon. I'm not sticking around for the game. The game seems like it's an afterthought. But for the coaches preparing these players for game prep and seeing how they prepare, they will have detailed notes about the level of attention and preparation and attention to detail that these players put into their craft. And listen, if you're a player at the Senior Bowl and you don't impress the coach, that's like failing the ultimate job interview. And Luke Getsy will get all of that information. He'll be able to bring it back to Ryan Poles in the front office. Eberflus will be basically right there. Ryan Poles is going to, I'm assuming he'll be in Mobile, and he'll be on the phone with Luke Getsy every single night. They're going to have a significant advantage over the teams that don't have coaches there. I know this year's the first year the Senior Bowl isn't having full coaching staffs, so maybe the advantage is a little bit less because you do have coaches from other teams also gathering that intel. But it's a great advantage, especially because the Bears need to level up their offense in the draft. They need to add the skill players, the offensive linemen. They need to improve around Justin Fields. Luke Getsy is the offensive coordinator. If Luke Getsy falls in love with a receiver or an offensive lineman or one of these skill guys that he's coaching up in Mobile, that opinion is going to carry a lot of weight on draft day. So I think it's great news for the Bears, and it's great for a guy like me who's going to Mobile. Now there's a little bit of a Bears flavor to it, so it's awesome.
Well, not only that, but they'll also have three other coaches on these staffs as well. They had 4 total coaches from the Bears there. And hey, I mean, the Bengals were coaching down here a few years ago. Now look at them, where they're at. Detroit coached last year, almost, could have made the playoffs this year, but vastly improved. It's a big deal. Quick follow up, and I'll let Shane get the final question to you. The Shrine Bowl this year did get full coaching staffs, but they got all the way down to the 8th, and I believe we said 15th draft selection. The Bears, full staff, full front office, number 1 pick. Obviously, they passed. Why do you think that is?
I think the Senior Bowl in their press release shared some really valuable information about the level of player that comes out of the Senior Bowl. The Shrine Game has done great work, and the level of prospect that's come out of the Shrine Game has improved over the last few years with draftable guys. But the Senior Bowl sent out, numbers. 106 players in each of the last 2 drafts have been drafted from the Senior Bowl. 80% 87% of the drafted Senior Bowl players over since 2019 made a 53-man roster. You're getting an up-close look at NFL players at the Senior Bowl, NFL prospects. And that's not to say the Shrine Game you're not, but the volume of players who will eventually be draft picks and be on a 53-man roster is simply higher at the Senior Bowl. You're getting a better, more up-close look at, again, I don't want to be negative or talk down about players at one game or the other, but there's better players. And I think if the Bears have an opportunity to pick one game or the other, you're going to want to choose the game, especially in a draft class where you have very high value picks. You're going to want to be at the game where you can look at the players who profile or project as better pros right now.
All right, last question, Brian. You can call me crazy if you want to. I think the Bears can be contenders for the playoffs next year myself. I think Justin Fields might be the best quarterback in that division. What do you think? Am I nuts?
Well, look, I bleed blue and orange, so I'm never going to say that's nuts. And I do think with Justin Fields, anything is possible. I said this before, that he is the first quarterback in my lifetime that there's a lot of gray hairs here, so that's a while. He's the first Bears quarterback in my lifetime that has made me tune in to a game on Sunday and feel like the Bears have a chance to win. And that is literally only because of him. So when you have an offseason as exciting and limitless as this one is for the Bears, if it's going to test Ryan Poles. If Ryan Poles cannot build a contender with the assets he now has at his disposal, you have to question whether the right general manager is in place. And whether that will be as soon as 2023, I don't know. The Bears have to try to strike quickly because, look, Justin Fields already is in year 3 next year, right? He's a season and a half away, 2 seasons at most away from the whispers of the next contract coming up. They do have the 5th-year option, and they do have control, and obviously that talk it's not like the other skill positions like wide receivers or running backs who try to get that new contract before year 4 or in year 4. He might be a full 5 years. But the window on the rookie contract at quarterback, like we all talk about, it is not closed, but it's halfway closed, right? He's done with year 2. So there should be some urgency with the Bears to improve the roster enough around him this offseason to do exactly what you're saying, Shane. I would be shocked if the Bears are not competing for an NFC North title next December. There will be no Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, I don't think. The Vikings, look, they won 11 games by 1 score. They could very easily be below 500 next year if those games flip. The Lions are the biggest threat. And who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that at the end of the 2022 season, as we profile toward 2023, the hierarchy in the NFC North is shifting so dramatically to where next summer, there's going to be a lot of people predicting the Lions to win the division. There's going to be a lot of people predicting the Bears to possibly be a wild card team or even a division winner. So it's refreshing to see the changing of the guard. And Shane, I don't think you're crazy. I think Justin Fields proved this year that at times, with a very undermanned offense around him, he was literally a man amongst boys. It's scary to think of what he can do if the Bears do right by him. And this will be the offseason that proves whether or not the team is capable of doing that.
It's good stuff.
Awesome.
Brian, man, thanks for coming on tonight and informing us all about what we need to know about the Bears coming up. Tell everybody where they can find everything that you do.
All my work is at bearstalk.com. So I launched the website last April, right before the 2022 draft. It's been fantastic. I can't express my appreciation to Bears fans enough. The site has just enjoyed some incredible success over the last 9 months or so. So head over to bearstalk.com. The Twitter account is at the Bears Talk or at Bryan Perez NFL. We have a YouTube channel as well, the Bears Talk and the Bears Talk podcast. So everything Bears Talk. If you want to talk about the Bears, very easy to remember. Bears Talk, you'll find me and all of our work somewhere.
That's awesome, man. Hey, and I'll see you in a couple weeks in Mobile, man.
Got it. I can't wait. Looking forward to that trip.
All right, Brian, thanks for coming
so
on,
much,
buddy.
Brian. Awesome.
You got
stuff.
it, guys. Take care.
There we go, Shane.
Awesome.
Bryan Perez, Bears Talk. That was good stuff.